You're listening to the Blue Raider Podcast, your number one resource for all the latest news, updates, and game recaps from Middle Tennessee athletics. Join us every Tuesday for our weekly interviews with players, coaches, and local media personalities alike. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to like and subscribe on all our socials. We're on Instagram, X, Twitter, and TikTok at Blue Raider Pod. If you're currently listening on your favorite streaming service, we also offer a visual presentation on YouTube at Blue Raider Podcast. Lastly, I'd love to hear your feedback, so don't forget to subscribe to GoMiddle.com to discuss this week's episodes along with the latest news and updates around Middle Tennessee. Welcome into the Blue Raider Podcast. I'm your host, Jake Bolden, and today is February 13th. And today we're discussing MTSU baseball and their upcoming season. And today my guest is Connor Smith. He is a student at MTSU, also a part of the MTSU Sidelines, and also a fellow member of the Murfreesboro Post writing crew like myself. He covers high school football and basketball and hopefully some spring sports coming up. Connor, how's it going?
Man, Jake, I'm doing great. It's good to be on the podcast. I love what you're doing, showing the public there's good sports in Middle Tennessee, including MTSU athletics.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I appreciate the support. And again, I'm always happy to bring on fellow Murfreesboro Post writers. Again, we do a lot of work that goes unseen, and you as a student especially. I lived that life for quite some time, being both a student and writing as a part-time gig, and I enjoyed it a lot. Kind of like, I know you're kind of fresh to the scene. Kind of tell me how this first year working for the Post has been for you.
Yeah, it's been kind of, not really too tough because I did a little high school stuff my senior year with my high school in Warren County. So, I kind of picked back up from then on out. It's not been too hard, just been a grind with school and then doing sidelines and baseball and the Post.
Well, excellent stuff. Well, the main reason I brought you on is I've noticed a lot of your stuff there. You post on Twitter. For those, we'll have an opportunity to plug your social media here at the end of the episode. We'll keep them teased there. But as we roll into the MTSU baseball season, you seem to have a lot of high hopes for the Raiders this year. I think with Meyers having removed the interim tag and finally moving into the official head coach position, had the ability to get his recruiting underneath him for his first full year. You seem to have high hopes to go along with what would be argued a relatively easier non-conference than what the Raiders are used to in the past.
Yeah, last year looking at what MTSU was able to accomplish, it was kind of up and down season. They'd go and they'd win 3 or 4 in a row, and then they'd drop 3 or 4 in a row. But when they got into the CUSA tournament, they really showed what kind of team they could be. Went on a run, had a few upsets against Louisiana Tech and UTSA, and then I think was 1 game away from the conference championship game. They returned several key players. I think I counted about 12 guys, pitchers in the field that contributed last year. So along with some transfers and freshmen this year that could make a big impact.
Do you think a part of that up and down season had a lot to do with, kind of the last second firing of Toman, or I should say parting ways of Toman, and then picking up Meyers there? He was kind of the only guy that was on staff that had any sort of head coaching experience prior to his time at MTSU.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's the Meyers thing, more of just the fact they lost 9 seniors going into last year. So most of the team was uncertain. Pitching-wise, you had Swan and Jaden Ham, but outside of that, there was a bunch of freshmen and underclassmen just trying to go in there and just get decent innings to win some games. In the field-wise, yeah, like I said, you lost 5 starters in the field. So, that really hurts you. I think it was just some growing pains from guys that were sophomores that are now juniors and seniors.
Absolutely. And I think another area, too, that we'll kind of see similarities this year is they're going to lose quite a few guys once again. So last year's team, they're going to lose Eric Swan, Jaden Ham, both through the MLB draft. Those guys went relatively high. And then you have JT Mabry and Jeremiah Boyd, who all got MLB contracts this past season. So you're going to lose a lot of production, obviously, guys who are at a minimum professional baseball player talent. And you're looking to recoup some of that talent that's now lost. So when you're talking about MLB level talent in a conference that's already very, very tough, you're going to have teams like Louisiana Tech. You're going to have teams like Dallas Baptist who are top 25 capable. What is it going to take for the Blue Raiders as far as these new faces, these transfer or guys that are returning to kind of take their game up to the next level and kind of try to repeat what that magic was there late in the season?
Yeah, I think the key is just playing their baseball. You saw guys like Eston Snyder, Luke Vinson, Briggs Rudder kind of find their own towards the end of the year, and really in the conference tournament. I think SS Snyder had something like 4 home runs in 4 games, just absolutely just exploded. Just play their kind of baseball and just go back to the basics of what Myers instilled in them the first year. Just go in there and do your job. Don't get too nervous. Don't try to do too much. Just do your job.
Yeah, I had noticed there in your one of your recent tweets there, you think that the Blue Raiders got snubbed, and I don't necessarily disagree with it. I think one of the guys, it's a tough position necessarily when it comes to preseason, is the catching position. I think Briggs Rudder is probably one of the best catchers there is in regards to Conference USA, but it's a tough position considering one of the best players in the conference is also a catcher. However, he slashed 306, 384, and 430 with 26 RBIs. He practically leads the team in returning players in RBIs, along with Essen Snyder, as you mentioned. What is it going to take for those guys to necessarily step up? Like you mentioned, Snyder and Rudder. The other guys I'm looking at too is Luke Vincent, who's going to be a 4-year starter, and Jackson Galloway.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of stepped up big time last year with another year in the system with Coach Kevin Nichols, the hitting coach. I think for them, just go in there, get another offseason in there, working with Coach Nichols, work on your approach at the plate. They glue better together this year. They played together for a full year because last year I think it was Briggs' first year starting. Some guys like Snyder, Gabe Jennings. So they got a year playing together. They've gelled together, and they've been developing pretty well.
Absolutely, and I think the strong suit of this team, or at least we hope is now the strong suit of this team, given that Meyers' background as a pitching coach and winning national championships as a pitching coach at South Carolina, is the amount of arms that he's bringing in via the transfer portal. Some of those names is like Will Jenkins from Belmont. You have Ian Anderson for Catawba Valley CC, Western Carolina, right-handed pitcher Matt Sheppel, and then you also got a Georgia Tech arm, sophomore Logan Bogue. So you've got a lot of righties that you're bringing in via the transfer portal. There's definitely going to be a lot of battle atop there as far as the weekend rotation goes, because you're going to lose guys like Jaden Ham, you're losing Eric Swan, so you're losing arguably your 1-2. I mean, Ham is definitely your 1, but you know, Swan was kind of a guy that got thrown around there a little bit. But where do you see the rotation going? Are we going to see more returning faces, or do you see any of these transfers potentially taking a spot there in the rotation?
Yeah, I think, you have a little bit mix of both, because last year you had guys like Patrick Johnson, Ollie Aikens, Justin Lee get some good innings as freshmen, and even Ollie Aikens and P. John were all conference freshmen. So I think you'll see those two for sure in the starting rotation. And then Matt Skeppel's a guy I'm really looking at. Has good size, 6'5", 215. He's got really good control. His big issue was his velocity. And last I talked to him about a month or two ago, he had been working in the offseason and got it up to the mid to low 90s for his fastball, and then high 80s for most other things. So I think he's figured that out. But he really showed last year at Western Carolina he could be that dude. He had a game against Kansas where he went, I believe it was 5 innings, no runs, and like 7 strikeouts. So he's shown flashes. Hopefully working with Coach Wisniewski and Myers gets him up to where he's consistent. But I can see those 3 really being the main stable points of the rotation, and then the rest of it being kind of like by committee.
Absolutely. And that's kind of how baseball is. You know, you kind of go into the season with an idea of what your starting rotation is going to look like. You roll through some of those non-conference games, you get knocked around a little bit, and certainly your entire game plan changes. I don't think anyone saw Jaden Ham having the season that he was going to have around this time last year. And you could even make the argument for Eric Swan. Eric definitely had a great arm, definitely an MLB level talent when it comes to arm talent, but I don't know that anyone saw him as an MLB draft pick. But that's just kind of what happens. Anyone can kind of find themselves, and who's to say that, you know, baseball is not a funny game. The cream's going to rise to the top there near the end of the season. As far as the freshmen go, we have 11 signees, and I'd love to go through all of them. But the one thing that kind of stands out to me is you have 6 guys from the mid-state. And that's something that I don't know that MTSU, of all the sports that are in the athletic department, baseball always recruits the Middle Tennessee area very, very well. But some could still argue that not enough. And you're a Middle Tennessee guy, much like myself, and I played in the Middle Tennessee area when I was in high school. There's tons of talent here. And the other aspect too of talent in Tennessee, you could make the argument that Florida, California, and Oklahoma have the best junior colleges. But I don't see any reason why Tennessee is not a part of that top tier junior college conferences in the entire nation. So you have the ability to pluck guys who are draft eligible, guys who are tops of the nation at a young age. And hopefully, again, just much like basketball, you can transform your season over in one off season based on these guys that you're able to pick up. So I don't know how much you've necessarily had the ability to look into some of these freshmen, because at MTSU recently, again, we've hit the transfer portal very hard. We haven't seen a lot of these high school players make their debut their freshman year, but a lot of them will take a red shirt. But are there any guys that you see out right as of now that could potentially make an impact?
Yeah, really two guys. One is in-state actually from Middle Tennessee area is Trace Phillips. There's a huge hole at that middle infield position with JT Mabry and Brett Coker going, and Phillips can play second, short, first, and he's been making some plays this offseason. He's been flashing the bat and the glove both. So I think he can make a push for possibly a starting lineup spot or like a little platoon player at some point. And then on the pitching side of things, Chandler Alderman from Illinois, with things being kind of like by committee and just having so much uncertainty outside the three really main guys, Skeppel, Akins, and Johnson, I could see Alderman making a spot. It's one of the top bullpen guys or one of the guys in the rotation.
Yeah, one thing that I brought up there was with all the transfer portal pickups, they were all right-handed. And one thing that may stand out with the freshman signees is that the majority of them are going to be left-handed pitchers. And a lot of our returning staff, if I'm not mistaken, are all right-handed pitchers. So I don't know, again, at this juncture when you're trying to get your first staff underneath you, as Meyers is having a first full offseason, if he's necessarily worried about how many lefties versus how many righties he's going to have. But I do think that there's some sort of credence to the fact that he picked up 4 freshmen left side arm throwers. So it's got to be something that he sees, at least in those guys, or maybe, again, he's trying to get some sort of mix there in the bullpen, as well as eventually in the future having some of those bullpen guys early on turn into rotation pitchers later on in their career. But past that, we talk a little bit into their non-conference schedule there. They're going to kick off the season this Friday, the 16th, at home against Bowling Green. It's an opponent they've played a few times over the last couple of seasons, but they always kind of have their steady in-state rivals that they're going to play here at Reese Smith Junior Field. Are there any games, though, that kind of stand out to you on that non-conference schedule?
Yeah, there's really 3 that stand out. Indiana, Alabama, and Vanderbilt. All 3 of those were finished in the RPI top 32 of last year's rankings. 2 of those teams, Bama and Vandy, are top 15, I think, according to AP USA. And both of those games are at Nashville and Tuscaloosa. So I could see those 2 and the Indiana game being some real big, games that could get away from us early, honestly, just going against the kind of talent that they have.
I think another area, too, that at least – it's good to have those tough games. It's good to measure up where your team is against those programs. But I think one thing that they've done well as far as the schedule goes is we have winnable non-conference games. I think like St. Bonaventure, which is a program that is not necessarily great at baseball, but I do think that baseball is a very momentum-built sport, and that when you get your feet underneath you, you're getting some hits collected over a weekend, you can feel a lot better about yourself. And, I know that from those that are at the GoMiddle.com forums are not necessarily excited about the lack of non-conference pop outside of those Power 5 teams. But I think there is something to be said about having a sort of non-conference schedule that can help build confidence in your team as you roll into conference play. Because unlike what we see with basketball, Conference USA is very, very strong in baseball. When we're talking about Dallas Baptist, who's a top 25 team, a team that hosted a regional a season ago, who the Raiders actually beat on the road, impressive enough as is. But you've got them. You've got Louisiana Tech, who's a team who's made multiple trips to the NCAA tournament. We're going to have some new teams like Sam Houston State, New Mexico State, that, again, kind of add a different taste than what we're used to, like when we lose teams like Charlotte and Southern Miss, Florida Atlantic, who typically have very strong baseball programs. FIU is going to see a downturn this year with a lot of their roster leaving in the offseason. But I think there's something to be said about how strong Conference USA is and what it takes, again, to not only build momentum going into that conference season, but, again, those games are so important, as only 3-game series are.
Yeah, I mean, CUSA is loaded this year. I mean, you mentioned all those teams plus Western. But going back to the out-of-conference, I think obviously there's 3 hard tests, but the way they schedule these games is pretty much perfect, because you have, like, for example, say like a 3-game set with FIU, and then you get a 3 or 4 game stretch with like St. Bonaventure, you get a a Lipscomb or a Belmont or something like that to kind of, go have an easy game to relax and kind of get back into the swing of things.
Right, and I think too that having those in-state games are always great for recruiting too. When you're able to again play Middle Tennessee area teams, that's your own ground. Those are guys that you're recruiting against in the offseason. So if you're able to pick up those wins, I do think that there is something to that. I speak for myself going through that process. I mean, I wanted to play for a winner, and it's important that you see how that program matches up with local teams or other teams that you're potentially being recruited by. So I think there is an importance to playing those local teams like Lipscomb, like Austin P, like Tennessee Tech, because again, as I say, the recruiting aspect of it, and also again, it is important to measure up against those programs. Last thing here as we kind of roll into some projections for the upcoming season. You have the Raiders after going last year where they finished just below 500. Even despite that big run they had there at the end of the year, they finished as the 7th seed, so they made the conference tournament. They're going to shake it up, I believe, a little bit differently this year with the Conference USA tournament. I believe all teams are going to make it. Where do you kind of see this team at by the end of the year?
As of now, looking towards the end of the year, I think this team could be a very dangerous team, anywhere from like a 2 to 5 seed, because obviously Dallas Baptist is just the clear-cut favorite in CUSA. But I mean, they got under their feet last year, especially in the conference tournament. Found some confidence. Some guys broke out onto the scene and kind of show what kind of players they can be. And if they can continue what they did in the conference tournament and kind of put it all together for a season and continue to be consistent, I can see them being a 2 to 4 seed. Because I mean, they show flashes last year, even through the regular season, where they'd go and be great for a 10-game stretch, go something like 7-3, 8-2, and then just do the exact opposite. So if they could stay consistent for a full season, I think they could be a really dangerous team.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too as well. The Conference USA preseason poll came out a couple weeks ago, and they had MTSU picked to finish 6th in the conference. As you mentioned, Dallas Baptist is a clear-cut favorite. They're certainly going to be a top 25 team, certainly vying for one of the coveted 16 regional host sites. Our newcomer Liberty is picked 2nd in front of Louisiana Tech, followed by Sam Houston and Western Kentucky, and then MTSU. There's a clear gap when you're looking at the voting poll there, as the top 5, followed by MTSU, is leading kind of that bottom 4 there. I've always said this, and it is the 100 miles of hate for a reason, but I always consider that Western Kentucky series to be kind of a swing game for the Blue Raiders, just because it always seems to be a team that Western is always a very good program when it comes to baseball, but in no other season like this one, where we see that it's very important that not only you try to steal a game like you did last year against Dallas Baptist, you may try to steal a game on the road at Liberty and Louisiana Tech, Sam Houston. Those are games that I don't consider them so far out of reach, because again, I think this team is built to be weekend warriors, because baseball is a funny game like that. If you're able to have one hit go your way, especially on that Friday night where you're going 1 against 1, I think we have the potential to have battles on those Friday nights. I think we have enough hitting to be able to contend on those Friday night battles. But as far as getting those swing games going, I think that's going to be the key for MTSU to be at least successful in the conference. I think they're going to win a lot of non-conference games, and I think truthfully, the record may be a little bit more deceiving to opponents, because when they're going to look at that non-conference, there's going to be a lot of wins. But I think it's so vital that they're able to pull off some of those swing games and jockey for good position there at the Conference USA tournament, because I think that's what hurt them the most this last year, was being that 7 seed. Your pitching dwindles there going into that last if game, and your outlook is totally different. If you're able to get into a good seed, you're able to avoid one more bye game. Things like that, they certainly add up, and these swing games are vital against their success come postseason time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at like the last series last year against Louisiana Tech, we were either the 3 or 4 seed, and in a span of 3 games went from 3/4 to 7th, fighting for a last chance to get into the postseason tournament. So, I mean, that's going to be a big thing, is just in those games like against Western or even FIU out on the road, just staying there and like you said, still a couple games and try to just, get all you can get.
Absolutely. Well, Connor, that'll wrap up our portion here today as far as the baseball wrap-up goes, and we'll be able to touch base as the season goes along, and we'll be following you along there on social media. Where's the best place for people to find your stuff?
On Twitter at Connor Smith 04.
Excellent stuff, and as well as all of his writings over at MurfreesboroPost.com. Again, you can keep up with his local stuff, not only just Blue Raider coverage, but he'll also be covering local high school sports coming this spring. As we've already touched, we're excited about what's upcoming here in the spring action. There's a lot of stuff to be covered and a lot of bases to be covered. I mean that literally and figuratively. But Connor, I absolutely appreciate you coming on. Hopefully we can do this again.
Yes, sir, Jake. I appreciate you.
Now it's time to move into our Raider wrap-up portion of the episode where we talk over last week's events at MTSU Athletics. Last week, the men's basketball program went 1-1 on the road and picked up their first road victory of the season. On Thursday, they dropped to Liberty 53-88. Elias King scores 19 points and 5 rebounds. It was certainly the opposite of what we've seen for the men's basketball program this season, not necessarily on the scoring aspect. 53 points is a little below our season average, but not far off. But the 88 points relinquished is the second, or is tied for the most points allowed this season, other than last weekend's Saturday matchup at Western Kentucky. However, the men bounced back on Saturday with a road victory, first of the season against Florida International, 68-66. Close one there near the end. We did everything we could to try to give that one away, but luckily we played enough defense there in the final seconds to win that one. Elias King is our week MVP with an 18.9 rebound performance there in Miami. And we had 4 Raiders in double digits, along with Coleman Jones, Porter, and Justin Buford. The men's upcoming schedule is they're back at home with a week where they can certainly get to a 3-game win streak with a matchup against New Mexico State on Thursday at 6:30. That game is viewable on ESPN+, and then the Saturday game on the 17th against UTEP, that tip-off is at 5 p.m., also on ESPN+. Like I said, certainly a week the Raiders could get onto a winning streak. Getting 2 lesser opponents in the conference and having a good road win certainly could carry some momentum here at home. Lady Raiders go perfect once again this week with 2 hard-fought home victories over Liberty and FIU. The ladies win on Thursday 81-55. It's Boulder Raven with 20 points and 5 rebounds. Savannah Wheeler also with 20 points, 6 assists, and 3 steals. On Saturday, the ladies pulled out a big one against second-place FIU by a score of 73-54. Savannah Wheeler with a 31-point performance to go along with a 11-assist double-double. And impressive as it was on Saturday, FIU certainly brought it in the first half with a narrow single-digit lead going into the break, but outscored the Panthers 40-26 in the second half. Other things of note, Courtney Whitson surpassed her 1,000th career rebound, making her second in history behind Ebony Rowe. Very tough milestone to hit with 1,000 career rebounds. Very few players play 4 seasons and score 1,000 points, let alone collect 1,000 rebounds, and I fully anticipate Whitson to continue to expand upon her records at MTSU as she finishes out her final season. The Lady Raiders will go on the road at New Mexico State this Thursday, the 15th at 7 p.m. That game is viewable on ESPN+, and then Saturday they are at UTEP on the 17th at 2 p.m., also viewable on ESPN+. Interesting road matchup. Going into the season, I pin-marked this New Mexico State road matchup as one that could trip up the Lady Raiders. New Mexico State has not been as good as I thought they were on paper. However, they are very capable of it. I still think, even though they're in the bottom half of the league, that we've seen this team win big games. They haven't necessarily pieced it together to be a top threat in the conference, but again, anytime you're on the road and that far away from home, anything could certainly happen. Much like last year, the Lady Raiders did drop the UTEP contest. So again, UTEP definitely not the same team that they were last year, losing head coach Kevin Baker and not returning very much talent from that team. But UTEP is always a tough place to play, and they will have an atmosphere that is going to be challenging to win at. Softball kicked off their season this last week and had a rough weekend in the NorCal kickoff. The ladies dropped all 5 contests on the week, starting with UC Davis 3-4 on Friday and St. Mary's 2-8. Then on Saturday, lost 3-4 to Cal Poly, and then 4-5 against Sacramento State on Saturday, and then finished up the weekend with a 2-3 loss at against San Jose State on Sunday. It's tough to say when you lose 4 of your 5 games by 1 run. Certainly just on the precipice of being able to pull out those victories. Just the offensive or timely hitting certainly cost the Lady Raiders this last weekend. But some players to note, Julia Garcia goes 5 of 11 with 4 walks. Ava Brooks, 6 of 14. Shelby Eccles goes 6 of 19, scores 3 runs, 2 RBIs, and 2 stolen bases. And despite losing 4 matchups in the circle. Cameron Carthage still throws 17.2 innings pitched with a 2.77 ERA and an impressive 1.36 walks per hits per inning pitch. So, again, it was a rough weekend for the ladies. They're one run away, one timely hit away from pulling out one or two of those games there this last weekend. They will continue their season coming up at Florida Gulf Coast. On Friday, they will face Delaware at 10 a.m., followed by Akron at 12:30 p.m. Then on Saturday, they will face Delaware once again at 12:30, and then they'll play the host school, Florida Gulf Coast, at 5:30 p.m., and wrap up the tournament on Sunday at 9 a.m. with another matchup against Akron. Moving on to men's tennis, the tennis team once again goes 1-1 in the week. They had a big home win against Virginia Tech on Friday, defeating the Hokies 6-1. After dropping the singles point, the men swept the singles, and 5 of the 6 singles finished in 2 sets. Of note, Leo Ray Queen defeated 102nd-ranked Fishback by a match score of 6-4 to 6-0. The men had a hard-fought loss at Indiana on Sunday, dropping that contest 3-4. Once again, lost the doubles point, and Andre Horak, Demis Teramolis, and Karim Al-Amin all win in singles. Their upcoming schedule is back home this Friday, the 16th at 5 p.m. at the Adams Tennis Complex against Northwestern. And don't miss that 4 p.m. youth clinic. And then on Sunday, the men are on the road once again at a Power 5 Auburn Tigers on the 18th, starting at 12 p.m. The Ladies Raiders tennis program goes 1-1 in the week as well, picking up their Friday matchup against Southeast Missouri State by a score of 4-2. They dropped their doubles point 2-0, but Garicani, Sposetti, Truden, and Swarbrick each pick up their singles match victories by a 2-0 set count. And then on Sunday, the Lady Raiders dropped the home contest against Lipscomb 3-4. Dropped the doubles point 2-1, but Pierre, Truden, and Swarbrick each picked up the singles win to make it close, but just not quite enough to bring out the victory. The Lady Raiders tennis program will be on the road this week. Starting on Friday the 16th, they'll be up in Clarksville. That match will start at 1:30 p.m. And then on Sunday the 18th, they are in Murray, Kentucky at Murray State, and that match will begin at 12 p.m. Indoor track and field returns from the Darius Dixon Memorial this past weekend. Of note, Brian Kiptu placed 3rd place in the 3K, and Sammy Sang placed 1st in the 3,000-meter seated event. Joel Ihikolam placed 2nd in the triple jump, and Carmelo Canizaro placed 3rd place in the 1,000-meter. On the women's side, Lenika Vance placed 2nd in the long jump. Odilia Jeb Chumba placed 1st in the 3K, followed by Faith Nyathi, finishing 2nd in the 3K. Nancy Mayo placed 1st in the 3K seated, and then Pamela Milano placed 3rd place in the 800 meters. The indoor track and field season will conclude at the end of February at the Conference USA Indoor Championships that will take place in Lynchburg, Virginia. Lastly, baseball, as we've already touched on, their season will begin this Friday the 16th. First pitch is at 3 p.m. at Reese Smith Jr. Field. Don't miss those matchups in person, or you can catch them on ESPN+. Well, that'll wrap it up for our episode today. I appreciate you all tuning in and sticking around with me. Hope you all enjoyed it, and you'll stick around for next week as we're able to sit down with head coach Derek Mason to discuss the upcoming football season and his most recent signing class. Again, don't forget to check out all of our socials over at Instagram, over at Twitter, over at TikTok at Blue Raider Pod. And of course, if you're listening on your favorite streaming services, we do have a visual presentation at YouTube under the name Blue Raider Podcast. Don't forget to stop by the GoMiddle.com forums to discuss today's episode as well as upcoming episodes. And until next time, go Blue.